Yes, that Mar-A-Lago used to be a national park. Known as Mar-A-Lago National Historic Site, it was only a part of the park system for just 8 short years and was never opened to the public. Now, there are a lot of histories of Mar-A-Lago online, but very few of them mention the NPS connection. Probably because there isn't a lot of information out there about it, but I find this to be the most interesting part of Mar-A-Lago's history as someone who runs a national parks channel. Sandwiched right in between two billionaire owners is a chapter of this property story that many have forgotten, but which I want to share with you today. I want to show you why and how Mar-A-Lago ever became a unit of the national park system in the first place, and what led to its eventual deauthorization. Let's discuss. Hello and welcome to National Park Diaries. My name is Cameron, and this is a channel dedicated to telling stories from the world's protected places. I talk about national parks, public lands, and protected areas from all around the world, all with the goal of helping you understand these places better and hopefully helping to protect them for the future. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, do like, subscribe, and hit the little bell thing so that you don't miss an episode. These things really do go a long way for helping me to bring these stories to more people. Also, if you would like, I do have a Patreon where you can support the channel more directly. I've got lots of good perks over there, like a Discord, AMAs, I run a book club, I've got director's cuts behind the scenes, lots of good stuff, all for as low as $2 per month. That's patreon.com/National Park Diaries. Okay, back to Mar-A-Lago. I think the best place to start for this story is with Mar-A-Lago's original owner and builder, Marjorie Merriweather Post. Born in 1887, Mrs. Post was a cereal heiress, having inherited the Postum Cereal Company from her father. When she took over the business, though, she was not content to rest on her laurels. She expanded and grew the business into the General Foods Corporation, which through a series of mergers and acquisitions no longer exists today, but eventually became Kraft Foods. So yeah, we're talking about a giant corporation here, and Mrs. Post benefited enormously from its success. At the height of her wealth, she was the richest woman in America with a net worth of about $250 million at the time, nearly $1 billion today. Mrs. Post, like many wealthy people before her and since, had a fondness for houses. Among others, she owned an Adirondacks Great Camp, the Hillwood Estate in Washington, D.C., which is now a museum, a Long Island mansion, a mega yacht, and before she even built Mar-A-Lago, she was the owner of a tiny little 10,000 square foot Palm Beach mansion known as Hagarcito. Hagarcito, though, was not adequate for hosting the lavish parties that Mrs. Post was fond of throwing. This was the Roaring '20s after all, and America's wealthy were not shy about displaying their wealth for all to see. This is when she decided to build Mar-A-Lago. Begun in 1923 on 20 acres on Palm Beach Island, construction on the mega mansion was completed in 1927 to the tune of $7 million, about $100 million in today's money. It was designed by Marion Wyeth and Joseph Urban, took 600 workers to construct, had 58 bedrooms and 33 bathrooms, and topped out over 100,000 square feet for all of the buildings on the property. There were 42-foot ceilings, gold-plated fixtures, Venetian silk, Italian marble, Spanish tile, and an English oak library with rare first edition books that were never read, apparently. The best part is Mrs. Post only ever spent the winters here. This was not even a full-time property for her. But as promised, she did host lavish parties here from time to time, and they were fancy, like the kind you'd find on Downton Abbey or The Crown or some other standard of wealth, which is so mind-bogglingly beyond my comprehension that I don't even want to think about it, so let's move on. Despite the excess and extravagance of Mar-A-Lago, Mrs. Post was known as a generous philanthropist. At Mar-A-Lago specifically, she hosted the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey circuses for underprivileged children, and during World War II, she opened up the property to convalescing veterans for recovery, therapy, and occupational training. It was in this spirit of philanthropy then that inspired Mrs. Post to donate the entirety of Mar-A-Lago to the federal government when she died in 1973. And thus, Mar-A-Lago entered probably the least extravagant phase of its history, but certainly one of its most interesting as well. It was actually designated as Mar-A-Lago National Historic Site in 1969, but came under Park Service protection on October 21st, 1972 for being, quote, an interesting record of a segment of the architectural, economic, and cultural history of the United States, end quote. And it was actually Mrs. Post's wish that Mar-A-Lago be used as a sort of winter White House. I mean, she got her wish, I guess. Anyway, she envisioned it as a place where presidents could host diplomatic meetings or as a presidential retreat. But the feds and the Park Service only agreed to accept the donation on the condition that Mrs. Post, through an endowment of some sort, continue to pay for its maintenance. Remember, there are over 100,000 square feet of buildings on this 20-acre property, and maintenance costs were estimated to be around $1 million per year. Congress, upon establishing Mar-A-Lago National Historic Site, didn't appropriate any money for its upkeep and maintenance. Again, that would all fall to Post. Which, I mean, she did leave money behind for this purpose, but it was not nearly enough, only about $200,000 annually. In 1980, Congress did eventually appropriate funds for upkeep, but only $100,000 a year, which again was not enough. By this point, throughout this 8-year experiment, it was becoming clear that such an expense was just not justifiable for inclusion in the Park Service. Mar-A-Lago never opened to the public. It never hosted any sort of interpretive programming. It never even really had a full-time NPS presence. Heck, the presidents in office during this time didn't even use it as the presidential retreat. Richard Nixon did vacation in Florida, but he spent his time on Key Biscayne mostly. Gerald Ford preferred the mountains, and frugal Jimmy Carter saw it as too excessive and extravagant for his liking. So, on December 23rd, 1980, Mar-A-Lago was deauthorized as a unit of the National Park System. It was relinquished back to the Post Foundation, who put the property up for sale. It does still remain to this day on the National Register of Historic Places and as a National Historic Landmark, both of which were designated after deauthorization. In 1985, none other than Donald J. Trump bought Mar-A-Lago for $10 million. He lived in it as his private residence until 1995, when he converted it into the Mar-A-Lago Club, which it remains today. In 2018, Forbes valued it at more than $160 million. And there you have it. Mar-A-Lago is one of the most famous properties in America today, but few people know of its history with the National Park Service. Perhaps it's the 8 short years it spent under NPS control, or the fact that it never opened to the public. But nonetheless, it occupies a unique and certainly very interesting chapter in the history of America's national parks. Did you know Mar-A-Lago used to be a national park? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell thing. Check out my Patreon if you want, and you can follow me on Instagram. That's the best place to get in touch with me, stay up to date with any channel happenings and updates I might have, and if you would like to keep up with my park adventures. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.